Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So I wanted to go over this article that's been making rounds on a couple different news sites about a chocolate industry-driven extinction of the Goliath beetle. And if you aren't familiar with the Goliath beetle, it's frequently called one of the largest insects, but really it's probably one of the heaviest insects. They're quite bulky, their larvae are extremely enormous, and they tend to live in West Africa, particularly in places like Ghana and the Ivory Coast, places that grow cocoa trees. And the cocoa industry is quite large and it requires quite a bit of land in order to support. And this land turnover from either rainforest or dry forest into cocoa plantations is putting a ton of stress on the populations of Goliath beetles. It's estimated that something like 80% of the species has declined, and this is only going to continue to get worse. This decline is not just from the cocoa trade, but also from people collecting these for specimens for preservation and display, and also as part of the pet trade. The authors of this article go on to kind of make the same sort of generalist conservation plea. Oh, we need to change the way we do things, so on and so forth, without actually giving any sort of specific idea of what should be done. And I don't know if this needs to be said, but the chocolate industry isn't going anywhere. Like, the world is not going to start consuming less chocolate in order to save this beetle. So what can be done, and why is it such an issue? So as far as the chocolate trade goes, why is the planting of cocoa so destructive? Part of it is, one, just the enormous amount of chocolate that the world goes through, and it has to be grown in a tropical setting, similar to coffee, so it requires a lot of acreage just to supply need, or supply demand. The other issue is that cocoa as a plant is very needy and very temperamental and doesn't produce very much. Cocoa trees generally don't produce very much fruit. They don't produce tons of cocoa pods, maybe about 20 a year. And those cocoa pods don't generally produce a ton of fruit. But you need basically the full harvest from two trees just to make something like a kilo of chocolate. It's an extremely inefficient crop. On top of it, cocoa trees are extremely hard on soil. They leach a lot of minerals, they require constant maintenance, and they eventually deplete the soil. So you have to continuously expand cocoa production because the land becomes depleted. On top of that, cocoa tends to have a lot of pest and disease problems, particularly the cocoa swollen shoot virus, which is one of the biggest diseases, and it kills up to 50% of the trees infected. So those trees have to be pulled out and destroyed. New trees have to be planted in a different spot. And so you have this constant need for more and more land to supply cocoa. So that's not going anywhere. The world consumes too much cocoa, too much chocolate. There's too high of a demand. And for most of these people growing cocoa in places like Ghana and the Ivory Coast, this is largely their best source of income. So they're not going to give that up. So that is kind of, at least for now, an unsolvable problem. However, when we talk about the pet trade and display insect trade, where you have people going out and collecting these, you can address this. And this is a problem because thousands and thousands of these end up getting collected. And so that can be stopped. And we do have a good idea in conservation of ways to get around this. And we can look to butterflies for this. A lot of butterfly conservatories, these butterfly houses, things like that breed butterflies, especially tropical butterflies, will then sell their specimens in order to help fund their own conservation efforts. And generally what they do is they sell the specimens after they've already died naturally. And this is the case for a lot of the large insect suppliers. If you go online and you look for dry butterflies to purchase, a lot of these butterflies are coming from sales from these conservatories. And they generally say these conservatories generally sell through a third party. So you can do that with Goliath beetles by breeding Goliath beetles. There are established protocols for breeding Goliath beetles from both traders and from laboratory settings. So a lot of researchers that work on Goliath beetles have to breed them because they're too much of a pain to have to collect. And it's just not feasible. So they just breed large numbers of them in the lab. So I will connect to this site, David's Beetles. This is a guy that breeds and sells beetles, including Goliath beetles, and he actually tells you how to breed them, all of the issues with them, and things that you have to look out for, such as diseases and things like that. And you can just breed these yourself. So if you are a intrepid young entrepreneur or something and you want to get into this trade, you can breed your own Goliath beetles and sell them in order to stop people going out and collecting these. But I will link to this article as well as Dave's Beetles if you want to check out his site. And I'll talk to you guys later.